He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. And there are multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also hit us up on Twitter, #GiantsChat. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So minicamp is over. We are now beginning the lengthy hiatus before the start of training camp. As you can see, Paul is overwhelmingly stressed. He doesn't know what he's going to do with himself for the next few weeks.
6 weeks of a black hole.
I know.
It's a Bermuda Triangle in the calendar. It's terrible. It's terrible.
Well, do you have some activities mapped out just to take your mind off of
I do.
what lies ahead?
I've got some good oldies concerts to go to in the next 2 months.
Wow. Okay. Look at this. See, I thought you were actually going to be maybe watching old Giants games on YouTube, but you're telling me you're consuming just old music. That's
50s,
your
50s,
yes.
60s, 70s.
Okay.
You know, the good stuff.
Now, this is still, though, within the state of Jersey. Are you taking the big risk of leaving the state of Jersey to go to a concert?
I'm not traveling far.
No.
I don't
okay,
have
so everything's within the Garden State.
I don't have to travel far.
Manhattan, I'm sure, has some good concerts.
I didn't say I wasn't going there. I said I wasn't going far.
Oh, okay. Well, look at you. A little bit of a teaser. See, I know how you feel about leaving the boundaries of the Garden State. You get in the vicinity of the GW Bridge or the Lincoln Tunnel.
If there's a good show to be had,
yes,
I would.
You will make the ultimate sacrifice.
I would consider going a few extra miles.
Wow. This is some big news, people, that we're breaking on Big Blue Kickoff Live.
See, what Lance, for those of you who don't watch this show very often, what Lance is having fun with is the fact that I am like the anti-traveler. I travel for work. I really don't travel for pleasure.
Well, I wasn't going to say anti-traveler overall. I know
I am.
Well, but I think it's more you're fond of the state of Jersey. And
this is true.
You don't necessarily feel
do.
as passionate about other aspects of the tri-state area.
I really do love the state. There's so much. Everything is here. It is a salad bar of a state.
Well, you wear it on your sleeve. It's been well documented. See, I've read through all of the documents over the last few years and then some. All right. Well, in all seriousness, minicamp is wrapped up. So we figured today we'd give you some takeaways, but specifically from some of the press conferences that took place over the last few days. And when John and I were on yesterday, we delved a little bit, Paul, into Brandon Brown, assistant GM. He spoke to the media, and I thought he provided some great insight on a variety of topics. And I think there's more to at least peel back the layers of. And one of the things that I thought was interesting as we gear up for the start of training camp and really see what this draft class is made of, he talked about the scouting process, Paul, into Deonte Banks and how it's a team effort. He worked with Jerome Henderson, then Brandon Brown and Joe Shane got their perspective, Brian Dable and so forth. But he mentioned about being in person at the game when they played Ohio State. And that was the game where Marvin Harrison Jr. lined up against Deonte Banks. And what impressed him, and this is why it's so important to get different aspects within the staff and also you as an individual evaluator to see a player in person and on film because it gives you, once again, I think, a different lens. And he had mentioned first play of the game, gets beat, but he loved the fact that he then regrouped, bounced back after that, and just seemed to be a completely different player.
They tell you that one of the best skills a cornerback can have is a short memory.
Yep.
And when you're a college player and you're looking to make it into the NFL and believe that you've got a shot to make a pro career out of this, you're going to sometimes be a little too amped up and a little too upset that, oh my God, I just got beat. The scouts saw that. It's on tape. Oh, I'm going to have to make the next play. And you get too amped up and you can play outside of yourself, which then causes a ripple effect and usually leads to bad things. Because the pro guys, well, they're in the business of getting guys who have composure, who have an understanding of even keel, who have an understanding that being a professional means you're going to be able to compartmentalize each play by itself. That's what the pro guys want. The college coaches, they want emotion. They want to win those games, make the boosters happy, make the alums happy, get to the bowl game. They're not interested. They know they've got you for 4 or 5 years, depending upon if there's a red shirt. Well, of course, the super seniors with the COVID was 6 years.
Yep.
But they're not interested in your 10 or 12-year NFL career. That's not their priority.
More of the small picture.
Right. So for them, it's about the immediacy. Just go make the play. And they also know that on the other side of the ball, you've got college players who may not be able to take advantage of the ripple mistakes that you make. So if I get beat on a 30-yard pass in college, and you know what? I'm the next play or two, I don't cover my guy correctly, there's a chance that that college quarterback or that college wide receiver don't make the second play that they'll make in the NFL. Because you get burned up here, Lance,
Sure.
They will go back and they'll continue lighting that match, and they will torch you until you come out of the game. It's a different scenario. So you have to be able to have that type of mentality in terms of forgetting a bad play literally one snap later, because you will be exposed in the NFL.
Well, and that, once again, goes back into knowing what you're seeing, not getting fooled. I'm talking about also from an evaluator standpoint, and that's why I thought it was very interesting what Brandon Brown was talking about. And the other big takeaway, and the reason why I brought up the Deonte Banks story, is there seems to be a trend which every team, I think, wants to follow in the NFL. We always focus about developing a roster, right, Paul? You know, making sure the 53 guys, the practice squad, you're doing your due diligence. Not enough is discussed about developing a front office, I feel, right? Nobody talks about that. And what I mean is when you bring in a pro personnel person or a scout person, you allow them to see if they want to continue to move up the ladder, which obviously is everybody's goal. They know what to anticipate down the road. And it seems as if Brandon Brown has been given every opportunity to sit in with Joe Schoen as Joe Schoen navigates being a general manager for the first time. So therefore, when Brandon Brown hopefully gets his opportunity, it's not so much of a rude awakening. So that seems to be just as much as an emphasis in the front office as it is with respect to developing the roster.
I feel that's what Bean did with Shane in Buffalo.
I think that's a very fair takeaway.
Which is probably why Shane is doing the same thing here.
Repeating it all over again. Yep. Good point.
And, you know, it's funny because you're right. We will often on this program credit the coaching staffs. How good is your coaching staff? How much can they coach your players up, especially when there are injuries and when that depth chart is not as good as it needs to be, and they'll find ways to get these guys to be competent. We very rarely talk about the front office, the scouts, the personnel guys who really, they're shopping for the groceries, as Parcells used to say. They're getting the groceries.
Yep.
And, you know, sometimes, just sometimes, it's not about the player or it's not about the coach. It is about the front office. It goes down to the root of the player acquisition. And how did you do in acquiring players that then gives the coaches and the players a chance to become a better team? And I think we have probably, during the course of this year and a half run, have not given enough. We've talked about Joe Schoen. We've talked about Dable, the coordinators.
Yep.
I don't think we've given enough. We've mentioned them on occasion, but I think we really need to tip our cats even more so to the guys on the ground, the scouts, and the personnel people who watch the tape, do the double checks, and then get that pile of information in that folder to Joe Schoen and to Brandon Brown and say, okay, this is what we got. You take a look at this. And then, of course, they're the ultimate evaluators.
Well, because even Brandon Brown was talking about, going back to the Deonte Banks story, during the course of the college season, somebody like Brandon Brown, who's traveling a lot more than Joe Schoen, because obviously we're in the midst of the season, and the scouts, you know, they're eyeing the players initially. They then bring it to the radar of the general manager and the coaching staff.
Right.
But to your point, you know, they're establishing the foundation. Initially, you need to say, okay, what piqued your interest about this player? What did you see earlier in the regular season? And then it, once again, slowly moves to the next stage.
I'm not giving up anything here that I can't give up. But Deonte Banks, as the Giants have said, was not on their radar at the start of last season. The college season, that is, in September. When
Well, he was also hurt, too.
That Maryland took the field. Right. So he was not on their radar as a guy who was going to be a high priority.
Yep.
Two of the scouts, of the area scouts, saw him, liked what they saw, and quickly ran that up the ladder and said, we should put him on the list. You need to start doing some more work on him because, hello, Deonte Banks could be a first-round pick. So as they ran that up the ladder, and then, as you mentioned, Brown, Schoen, finally the big guns had to go in and see him as they were running it up the ladder. From that point, then you had Wink met with him. Jerome Henderson, the defensive backs coach, met with him. The medical staff. I mean, they did extensive work. As once it got up to the ladder in the middle of the season when Shane and Brown saw what he did in that game, they knew, like, okay, guess what? He needs to be a priority now. And there's a chance that he might fall to where we're going to pick in that first round. He needs to be one of the priority guys. And they upped their homework on him to the nth degree. And he became now one of the priorities. And it went all the way through the entire offseason as they continued to have more and more people meet with him, backtrack, see more games, continue to go back and look at more film. Now you got to do the background checks, because now once you got that, you say, I think we know what he is, but now what is he inside? Now we got to do background checks. We got to find out about him as a teammate. We got to find out about his upbringing and what's this guy about. He checked every box. I mean, I'm sorry, folks. He was the guy they wanted all along. It's just the way it is.
Well, and the positional coaches are an important part of the process, because when Jerome Henderson could go out to dinner with Deonte Banks, remember, that's a guy that he's going to spend a lot of time with moving forward.
Yes.
I mean, that's the guy you're in all those key meetings with. Not to say that Wink is not important in Brian Dable, but you spend more time with your positional coach than anybody else.
And the Giants on draft night, they were scared that he was going to get into the neighborhood and then get scapped up. They just did not know if he was going to quite make it to them. That's why Joe Shane made the trade to move up a spot, because they weren't afraid that Jacksonville was going to take him. What they were more afraid of was somebody else going to jump, make a deal with Jacksonville right in front of the Giants and take him. So
that's the motivation to move up.
That's why they made the trade to move up just one spot. And there were a lot of folks out there I know who maybe were not as high on Banks, or maybe thought, as is the case every first round, the team always says, we got a guy we were interested in, or we got a guy we really liked, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, sometimes there's some smoke involved. There's a few beef byproducts in that answer.
Well, what are you going to say? We picked this guy.
You like how I worked food in there?
Yes. Well, you did that very subtly.
Really cool, right?
Yes. Well, I was simply just going to quickly react to what you were saying. I mean, as if somebody's going to get in front of a podium and say, yeah, we took this guy in the first round, but you know what? We really don't like him, and we have doubts about his skill set.
Right. We get that. Okay, we get that. But in truth, this was the target. And they did what they had to do to get him. And that's why you saw Wink Martindale with the bear hug.
Yeah.
This is legit, folks. I know there's some people out there who don't necessarily want to believe it. They think it's just organizational speak. That's not the case. This is the guy they wanted.
Well, Paul, I don't even think you need to make a strong case. What I would advise everybody to do is check out the latest episode of Giants Life.
It
actually documents it very nicely.
It's all in there.
Their enthusiasm and the process in terms of Joe Shane moving up, speaking with Jacksonville, and making the deal. So, I mean, this is not smoke and mirrors here. There's actually video that you can consume and watch, which proves that they clearly were extremely interested.
There were three other teams as Banks was dropping down into their neighborhood and vicinity. There were three other teams that there was serious concern, they might grab him. He may not get to 21 at that point. And as those teams passed on him, that's when finally, when they got to Jacksonville, that Joe's like, we're not pushing our luck anymore. Okay? Someone else is going to trade with Jacksonville, and that's where we're going to get burned. All right. He's already passed by the three teams we were concerned about. Let's go get him. And they did.
On a related note, you know what I found very interesting about the back and forth? And actually, I think the Jaguars did their own piece, if you wanted to see what the conversation was like on their side.
Yes, they did.
Which was really interesting. I recommend all Giants fans to take a look, because it's always interesting to see what goes on behind the scenes. But when Trent Baalke, the Jaguars general manager, he wanted to know the side of the ball that Joe Shane. And sometimes you'd be worried about, am I giving up a little bit too much? Is he playing it against another team and so forth? So, the trust factor, the relationships between other general managers is critical in making something like that work.
And Joe has made it very clear since he's been here that relationships are a big part of his job. And I give him a lot of credit for that because in today's times, it's easy not to trust somebody.
Sure.
But Joe believes that he's done business the right way throughout his career and that he has built the kinds of relationships that will allow him to trust others and them to trust him. And it absolutely worked to the Giants' advantage.
I also, speaking of relationships, found it comical that Brandon Brown was talking about his routine. He was asked, like, what the schedule is like, right? Yes. You know where I'm getting at? Well, first of all, it was interesting. He said, you have time to yourself before 8 a.m. and after 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Everything in between, you have no idea what's going to come on your desk. But he was talking about the fact that the front office is just as competitive as the players in terms of getting in the gym. We know Daniel Jones is the first guy in the building.
At 6 a.m.
Correct. But supposedly Brandon Brown says, I look to go in, get my morning workout, and Joe Shane is always there before I even get into the gym. So it just goes to show you, and what he was being obviously tongue-in-cheek with his comments. There's no bad blood or anything. But the fire and the passion is felt, once again, through the front office as much as it is with respect to the roster.
It's top to bottom.
Yeah.
It really is. And it even goes into the lunchroom. I'm telling you, it goes to the lunchroom because even the folks who are working the lunchroom here at the facility, they like to hear the fact that, hey, man, that steak was really good today, or that burger was extra juicy. I'll tell them, I'll say, man, I'm telling you, you cook those fries just right. And sometimes they're a little crispier than other times. They love to hear that. They get really excited when you tell them. And I'm serious. And so that's why I always compliment them because they do a great job in the lunchroom here.
Well, especially their baked potatoes.
Incredible.
Them. Come on, I can't believe you buried the lead here.
Well,
you went fries over baked potato?
Baked potatoes.
How about that watermelon today?
The watermelon today was beyond great. But there is a competitive nature to everything that's done here. People want to be on the top level of whatever it is that they do. And it goes from the top all the way to every level of the organization. And I'll be frank with you, I love it. I enjoy it. It's great to be around people who want to be good all the time, who strive to be at the top of their business. It's just so cool.
No, I'm in agreement with you, and that's why I thought that was another maybe minor storyline that came out of his press conference, but I think it speaks volumes about what's going on in this building.
The environment.
Yeah, without a doubt. And here's the other thing. This is what Brown was also getting at, which I thought was a key point. If you're a player, okay, and you're in the gym early, and you see an assistant general manager working out, who's not getting on the field and playing, if he's got that type of a work ethic, then doesn't that register into the player's mind? If he's doing that, then I am now in something that is much more related to my livelihood. If I don't bring the same level of effort, then what is that supposed to say about me?
Let me tell you something yesterday. And again, I don't think I'm giving anything up here.
Did you beat somebody into the gym?
No,
is that what you're insinuating? Okay.
After yesterday's minicamp had concluded, it went and a half hour early because of the lightning strikes in the area. And they had to clear the field a half hour early. And they brought everybody in. Everybody did their weights, their training. They went to the medical room and everything. They did what they had to do. And then everybody was excused and left for the day. I happen to have to go down to the field house for something. And as I'm walking past the weight room, who's in there but Wink Martindale doing weights? No joke. Wink was a linebacker.
Oh, yeah.
In college. And you could see he's a sturdy guy. He's a sturdy guy, okay? I'm passing through, and there's Wink. He's working on the weights, okay? So everything about this organization is about energy. It's about drive. It's about enthusiasm. It's about a desire to say, we have goals that need to be met. And whatever it takes to meet them, we're going to meet them. And it's a personal thing. It's a team thing. It's an organizational thing. It's a great environment to be a part of.
100%. I'm completely with you. And that's why observations like this, I think, are interesting to talk about. And it's always good to get the perspective of a front office member who can shed light on the competitive nature. And it's addictive. It passes through from the general manager to the assistant GM to the members of the coaching staff.
I'm not going to fight Wink in the back alley, I'll tell you that.
Oh, really?
That's not a good move.
That's not what you say, behind his back. I don't know about that.
He's
the ultra confidence that you showcase.
He's a big man.
He is. There's no doubt about it. Well, you could tell he's born and bred a football player. which made the smooth transition to football coach. One other thing that I wanted to add to the conversation with respect to Brandon Brown, because like I said, I thought there was a lot of great stuff, and if you have not checked it out, the full video is up on Giants.com and the YouTube page. I really would recommend everybody to take the time to listen to his answers, because there was a lot of substance there. He was asked, of course, about Saquon Barkley, and there was nothing that obviously he provided that is going to shed light on the negotiations, because they're going to keep it in-house. But he was asked about the running back market, Paul, if you recall, and whether or not he thinks the running back market has changed in comparison to other positions. And he said, don't put the running backs on an island. Look at the safety position this offseason and Julian Love, and how a lot of people maybe anticipated there was going to be more money being spent on that position, and all of a sudden it didn't turn out to be that way. So the point is, I think we focus as a group and as members of the media, running back, running back, running back. This offseason, I think, gave us the inkling there are other positions that teams vary in terms of how they value talent. And I think safety is right near the top of the list.
Yeah, that's true. There was a while there for a few years, the tide was really helping the safety values. Their contracts were going up for a little while, especially when you had the Legion of Boom out in Seattle.
Yep.
There seemed to be a lot of emphasis on big money for safeties. They were quickly climbing up the scale. I remember when Deion Grant, he was with Carolina and Seattle and finally wound up with the Giants later on and helped them win a Super Bowl. But when Deion had gone as a free agent, he had almost signed with the Giants. And I believe that's when he signed in Seattle, if I'm not mistaken. He went from Carolina to Seattle first, or was it the other way around?
Let me double check.
I think he went Carolina to Seattle, and he almost signed with the Giants, but he wound up taking the highest paying safety contract in the league. And I think it was Seattle second, right?
I'm bringing up
get a look at that.
Yeah, breakdown. He went from Carolina to Jacksonville,
then Seattle. Okay.
Yes. Then he came to the Giants.
And he signed a record-breaking contract as a safety at that time, because at that particular time frame in the league, safety values were going up. And that's not the case anymore right now. So yes, there's a lot of give and take with the tide. It comes and it goes, different positions, different style of play.
Yep.
There was
and
a
your
time,
scheme, too.
Well, yeah.
It's going to dictate things.
There was a time when middle linebackers were getting paid more than outside linebackers. There was a time, but not now, because outside linebackers have converted into edge guys. And now those guys are your hot properties. It's just the way it is. Hey, before, I know you got to read your spots, and we got to get to these callers. A couple of people on hold. Give us 1 minute to get to your calls. I just want to send out condolences to the friends and family of Homer Jones. Former Giants legend wide receiver. I know we don't have a lot of folks who necessarily are, old-time throwbacks. We have a lot of young people who watch the show, and even a lot of people who weren't even born when Phil Simms won Super Bowl 21. And you guys watch the show, and we know from your comments on YouTube, there's a lot of young folks who don't necessarily have the history background, and they don't like me necessarily to talk a lot about it. But Homer Jones was a world-class sprinter who, by some stretch of the imagination, when he was on a track team with the great Bob Hayes, who at one time was the world's fastest man, when he was later recruited by the Dallas Cowboys, he had beaten Hayes in many of sprints. He was drafted into the AFL, had a knee injury, then wound up coming to the Giants as a free agent and cross leagues from the AFL to the NFL to the Giants. The Giants gave him a knee surgery to say, okay, we can fix that knee, and you're going to be a wide receiver for us. And lo and behold, after that rookie season where he didn't play much because he was rehabbing from the knee, beginning in that second year, he became a superstar wide receiver. And him and Hayes were the two guys ahead of their time as sprinters, world-class speed, who could just be absolutely as explosive as any receivers you have ever seen in the National Football League. They were that good. Now, the rest of the Giants team during the late 60s wasn't as great. Okay, they just didn't have as many tools. But in terms of weaponry, Homer Jones was as dangerous a receiver as there's ever been in this league. Homer averaged over 22 yards a catch in his career. And amongst qualifiers, according to the statistical analysis of NFL stats, he owns the highest yards per catch of any player in NFL history. 22.3 yards per catch. That is ridiculous. he's also the guy who invented the spike.
I was just going to say that. Yep.
Because he had gone into the end zone catching a touchdown, didn't want to get fined for throwing the ball into the crowd, which is what a lot of players used to do, and decided, all right, I'll just slam it into the ground. That was the first ever spike. And a whole generation of players, maybe 2 generations of players after that, began to use the spike in the end zone. After the 1969 season, Homer's knee was wearing out. And it was a shame, but the knee that he had repaired was wearing out. He was probably going to retire, had an inkling about playing football, but wasn't sure. His family was from Ohio. And his father had said to him, well, if you're going to keep playing, why don't you come back to Ohio? So Homer asked the Giants if they would trade him to Cleveland so he could be with the Browns and then be near his family. So the Giants traded him to the Cleveland Browns for running back Ron Johnson, who was playing in the backfield with Leroy Kelly. Not bad, right? And Jim Kinnicky, defensive tackle.
Yep.
They make the deal before the 1970 season. Homer goes to Cleveland. Ron Johnson becomes the first ever 1,000-yard rusher in Giants history in his first season with the Giants. Kinnicky wound up getting hurt, only played a couple of years. And Homer doesn't do much as a receiver with Cleveland. He is their kickoff returner. In the Monday Night Football game, the first ever regular season Monday Night Football game, Cleveland against the Jets at Cleveland's Municipal Stadium, he runs back a kickoff, 100 yards for a touchdown, which is very historic in itself. That was his biggest and best ever play with Cleveland. He was their kickoff returner for that season and barely played any offense. His knee was not well, and he was basically at the end of his rope and retired after the 1970 season. But he was known for his speed, his elusiveness. He used to always bust routes. And that was the funny part because he was a bit of a flaky guy, very happy-go-lucky, and a real character. and he was in the days with Earl Morrall and then Fran Tarkenton as quarterback. And, you know, imagine a defensive coordinator dealing with Tarkenton scrambling like he was and Homer Jones literally running wild all over the field.
Yeah.
You know, 82 years old, had a lot of health problems in recent years, finally succumbed to cancer just yesterday at the age of 82, lived down in Texas, played at Texas Southern, by the way, which was Michael Strahan's place. In fact, I want to say, Emlyn Tunnell was the guy who advocated for him with the Giants. He advocated to Wellington Mara to give this guy a chance to get Homer Jones on the team. Emlyn Tunnell, of course, a Hall of Famer, from the Giants from years ago as a defensive back and as a kickoff returner. And he gave permission to give his 45 to Homer Jones when he came to the Giants. And that's why Homer was 45 during the course of his career. I know I went a little bit long, but in respect to Homer Jones, who is truly one of the most explosive players this league has ever seen, and is not in the Hall of Fame because his career was too short.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the biggest contributing factor.
But to ignore his contribution to the game and to New York football would be a remiss situation. So I appreciate you giving me the time.
Sure.
Folks, I know I went long for those of you who don't appreciate the history, but rest in peace, Homer Jones.
Just one quick note. Led the NFL in touchdowns in 1967, which was his best season. So, I mean, it wasn't just him putting his stamp on the Giants. He put his stamp on the NFL landscape.
That was Tarkenton's first year with the Giants.
Yeah. 13 touchdowns. Not too shabby in terms of what he was able to produce. And also, they called him Rhino, his teammates. Do you know the backstory to that?
I don't
That's
know
what
about...
I just checked out here.
That I do not know
Okay.
of.
Yeah, I was curious because I know we talked about the spike. It says that he was referred to as Rhino by his teammates, but I don't have the backstory to that.
I believe that
interesting.
Tunnell gave him a nickname, and I don't think it was Rhino. It had to do with his speed, and I can't recall what it was. I think because it was Emlyn's Gremlins, because he was a coach at that point, an assistant coach with the Giants. Anyway, I digress. I know we got to get to these phone calls. Folks, again, I just appreciate it. Homer Jones has been lost at the age of 82. He passes away, and a true, spectacular New York football giant.
Few reminders before we open up the phone lines. Giants Huddle Podcast, you can check that out on your favorite podcast platform. You could also go to giants.com/podcast. As we gear up for the start of the 2023 season, the schedule's out. Single game tickets, they're now on sale. Don't miss the Giants at MetLife Stadium. Visit giants.com/tickets to secure your seat, and you could take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2023 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And the Giants official connected TV streaming app, it's Giants TV. It brings you original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the phone lines at 201-939-4513. Tom is in Stratford. He gets us going here on Thursday's edition of BBKL. What's happening, Tom? What do you got for us?
Hi, guys. Happy Thursday.
Hi. Same to you.
Paul, thank you for that history lesson. I appreciated that. I did not know any of those things about Mr. Jones. So,
well, you're welcome. And if you get a chance, go find some of his highlights on YouTube. They're pretty spectacular. You think Odell Beckham was something? Go get a look at Homer Jones.
Yeah, I think I will. Definitely will. And I have watched that other episode that you were talking about, the behind scene, about the draft trade.
Yeah, Giants
that
life.
was very interesting. If you're a Giant fan, you need to watch those videos. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, well, now I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions. With the just concluded minicamp, were all the guys that were on IR last year participating?
They were doing stuff on the side with the trainers. You're talking about guys like Beavers, Shepard, Robinson. These are guys who were doing stuff on the side. I know that some of the writers made a big deal that Shepard ran a couple of straight-on fly patterns yesterday. And, in fact, there was one where he went about 60 yards in a full gait straight ahead and caught a bomb. And the writers were getting all like up, oh, wow. Okay, but he's not cutting, and that's the big thing. When you start right now, he can run straight ahead. That's great. But, there's still taking it slow because you got to be able to cut. You got to be able to take the pounding and the hitting that goes on the NFL. I mean, for right now, if you're Joe Q Public, run into the grocery store to get that quart of milk that your wife wants, he's fine to do that. But I don't know that he's prepared to play the Cowboys week 1 as of today, okay? Because that's not the case.
Yeah, well, Sterling actually spoke to the media, and he said that, right now he can't guarantee that he's going to be ready for the first day of training.
Right.
They're taking it slow, and they'll see how things play out.
He knows. He said his plan is to be ready for opening day, but he's not going to rush it, and he doesn't know if that's going to happen. I'm telling you to be conservative, knowing how this organization is always erring on the side of caution. Think about more like he'll be pup at the first week of the season. Think of it that way. And if he is active, then it's a joy. But try not to get your hopes too high for week number 1. Because there's still too many weeks between now and then. There's no way to tell how the rest of his rehab will progress or if there'll be a setback.
Well, and I would say that about all the players that were banged up last year. Let's see what happens when training camp starts. Does anybody go on the PUP list? Are they actually taking part in team activities?
Aaron Robinson, too.
Yeah, 100%. He had a serious knee injury. That, to me, is a better indicator than anything that they may be doing on the side right now during OTAs.
Yeah.
And have they announced when the training camp will start yet?
We know it's going to be the last week of July. The actual date, Coach Dable has said 3 times to the media in the last couple of weeks. He's mentioned July 25th, but he hasn't made clear as to whether or not that's when the rookies will report. Is that when the veterans report? Because you got to remember something. When the guys report, they come in, they do physicals, they get weighed, okay, and they're checking in. It's not that day right away. The rookies come in a day earlier usually. Coaches come in a few days earlier. And that's not the day they hit the practice field. When we have that available, we'll let you know.
Yeah, and the Giants, they'll announce it. They do that every single year. But no official announcement to answer your question.
But
don't
go out of the country the last week of July, okay?
Okay. For a quick thing, I'll get off. Are you guys going dark for the next 6 weeks?
No.
Absolutely not.
Our show is 24/7 year-round. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then I know some people have called in and are expressing a little concern about having John Michael Schmitz next to, let's say, theoretically, Azudu.
Zudu, you're talking about?
Yeah, Azudu. And to me, John Michael Schmidt's not going to be our typical rookie because of a couple of factors. He's been in college for 6 years. He's 24 years old. He was a 5-time Scholastic All-American, so he's a really smart dude. And so I'm not overly concerned with his inexperience factor. So,
well, I don't think that's really the key element that I think anybody's concerned about, and appreciate the phone call, Tom. It's more of, you could be an extremely intellectual player, and there's no doubt about that, and he has a wealth of experience, but if you've never lined up next to a player, it's a new person, Paul, to get used to. It's no different. You could have the most experienced quarterback in the NFL, right? A new wide receiver comes in. Just because the quarterback has experience doesn't mean he knows the subtleties of the route and the placement of the ball, because he's got to get used to that. So it's more of, you need time on the field, and they'll do that accordingly during the course of training camp. And remember, it could very well be Bredesen, a more polished veteran, who winds up winning the job. It's not necessarily guaranteed to be Azudu.
We've talked about this a lot since the draft, and I'm going to try to just clean this up very succinctly in 2 quick points. Number one, during the media portions of the OTAs and the minicamp, Bredesen and Schmitz both took first-team reps.
Yep.
So let's make that very clear. Both guys were getting an opportunity to snap to Daniel Jones. Schmitz was doing the dead snap. Bredesen was doing the regular standard snap. And Daniel Jones has not expressed a preference. He's fine with either one. And offensive line coach Bobby Johnson said there's no reason to be worried about it because he can handle both. Let's get that out of the way. Number two, yes, John Michael Schmitz was drafted in the 2nd round with the anticipation he's going to be a very good player for a long time. Optimistically, they'll do everything they can to coach him up and see if they can get him ready for week 1. If he's there, he will start week 1. If he's not there, he will start when he's ready. That's it. There's nothing else to say. And if he's not starting week 1, it's okay. It's absolutely okay. I mean, they're playing Dallas. We talked about this the other day. Were you in with me the other day?
Well, I mean, we've had some conversations about John Michael Schmitz.
They're starting with the Dallas Cowboys, a difficult defensive front to deal with.
Yep.
Dan Quinn is a tough defensive coordinator. He will confuse you. He will stunt and twist and do all kinds of things to you to try to hurt your quarterback. Well, to hit your quarterback, I should say. To be frank, if they decided that the veteran experienced Bredesen was a better opening night at home against the Dallas Cowboys, if they thought that mentally that was a better bet than going with Schmitz right out of the box, I couldn't blame them for that. I couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, I'm not saying that's crazy. I would think, though, for the sake of continuity, Paul, regardless of the opponent, if John Michael Schmidt's going to be your starting center, to me, you start him right away to build that chemistry with Daniel Jones.
If he is ready, you have to start him.
Yeah, I don't think you overthink that.
If he's ready. But if he's not, I don't think there's necessarily a bad side to Bredesen starting that game if he's got to.
No, I mean, listen, they didn't draft him to be the starting center in just 2023. What do I always tell you? They drafted him to be the starting center for the next several years and then hopefully earn a second contract.
But yes, I think it would be a really great sign for Schmitz and everybody in the building if he is ready in week 1. That would be a bonus. That would be outstanding.
Well, related to your point, Bobby Johnson, the offensive line coach, was talking with reporters the other day, and he said, John Michael Schmitz, the rude awakening is going to come when they put the pads on. He goes up against an all-pro defensive tackle in Dexter Lawrence. So forget the Cowboys. He's going to be tested right out of the gates.
Wink.
That first practice.
Wink.
Yeah, but specifically Dex, though, I'm talking about.
Yes.
Okay? Dex is going to teach him a lesson or two about what life in the NFL is all about.
And he should. Or iron sharpens iron. I mean, look, if you can't give him a taste of what he's going to see in the regular season, that is a potentially rude awakening.
Well, that's why I think every team would love to have balance play in the trenches, because you want your offensive line, regardless of whether you think there's some question marks, to be battle-tested against a really good defensive front before the season even starts.
This goes back to the off-season programs being ticky-tack. Okay?
Well, that's why we have to wait for training camp.
That's why
to
we
get some of
talk
this.
about it all the time. The guys in the trenches, they need real training, and they don't get it until the end of July.
Let's head back to the phone lines. We check in with Desmond in New Jersey. He joins us here on BBKL. What's happening, Desmond? What do you got for us?
Hey, good afternoon, guys.
Hi.
Paul, thank you so much for the history lesson. Honestly, I'm one of your few young listeners who enjoy the history lesson.
Well, thank you.
I go back and I appreciate that because it makes me appreciate the Giants even more. One of the things I wanted to touch about, which you were talking about earlier, was the fact that the Giants regime right now is ultra competitive, and now that brings out the best in everyone. How come this didn't happen, in the prior regimes? I know you don't like talking about, prior regimes and why they didn't work out, but that's one of the things that kind of intrigued me. I know the NFL is ultra competitive, but why is this regime different from prior regimes?
Well, listen, I don't want to make the assumption, Desmond, it's a great question, that individuals weren't competitive in previous versions of the Giants front office. It was just Brandon Brown actually gave that information out to the public where he was sharing a story. Listen, there are members of the Giants front office that went to the gym early, in previous regimes, and they worked out and they had a competitive edge. It was just
true.
They weren't necessarily speaking about that to the media on a regular basis. So that's why Paul and I are pointing that out. I don't want to make it sound like nobody in this building was competitive prior. It's just you feel it and they talk about it on a consistent basis.
I think, if I may be so bold, and I will not speak for the ownership here, but an observation that I might be able to use to answer your question is that there's a very good mix here of people on this staff throughout the football operation of guys who are familiar with each other, but also guys who came from outside.
Who have not worked together.
Correct.
previously.
Now, we praised, for example, Joe Judge for hiring a whole staff that was connected to him in Alabama and New England and all that stuff. That turned out not to be a great thing because there wasn't enough of give and take. There wasn't enough of checks and balances within the staff that helped make them better. They were too much on the same page. And sometimes you have to have some conflict to be able to improve, right? Because if you don't question what you're doing, you can't get better. You have to sometimes question and have a counteraction. I think if I had to nail this thing, it's that the GM and the head coach went through a rebuilding process together in Buffalo, which I find immeasurably valuable. And then on top of that, as they went and built their staff, Dable had no connection to Kafka. Dable had no connection to McGahee, and he kept him. Dable had no connection to Martindale.
Yep.
So they found the right mix of guys who are together with a mix of guys who were not necessarily familiar with each other, but had respect for each other and enough that they could actually counter each other. Very important.
I have some.
Schmelk's now popping in here.
Yes, I guys, I have some breaking news. They are cleaning up barbecue at 1:30 land, so I suggest you get out of here around 1:27 so you get food. Okay.
I appreciate the update. See, that was very important for our listeners and viewers to know.
John,
Yes.
did you get the watermelon? It's great. Get that slice of watermelon.
So that means the show will be ending a little bit early today. Okay, that's what that memo revealed. We are somebody and individuals that pride ourselves in trying to maximize the show. We will not be maximizing the show today. I will promise you that because Pierce and I haven't eaten.
Anyway,
yet. You have maybe
I
gotten
have.
a nibble.
Did I answer your question somewhat? I hope.
You did.
Okay.
Now, I wanted to ask one last question.
Yes.
Given the fact that the NFL, each year you have, 5 to 7 new teams in the playoffs, I'm a little afraid that the Giants could be one of the teams that could be out, even though there might be some improvement within
That's
the Giants
absolutely
organization.
possible.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
That could definitely happen. This could be a better team. In fact, I think it will be. That does not automatically guarantee a playoff
Well,
spot.
because, Desmond, and listen, we'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. What you have to understand is the NFL doesn't operate in a vacuum, okay? There are other teams around the Giants that are improving too. Everybody doesn't stay the same and the Giants get better. So if everyone is moving or hoping to move in the positive direction, yes, the Giants could absolutely improve this year, but they could very well miss the playoffs. That is not something that's crazy to think about. I bring this statistic up all the time. 14 teams in the playoffs half the field was new last year. That's a 50% change.
I know.
So you have to be prepared for life in the NFL does not necessarily duplicate, and you don't just carry it over. It's been well documented.
Got a couple more calls.
Yeah,
Let's see
sure.
if we can get them in.
Absolutely. John is in Maine. He joins us here on BBKO. What's happening, John?
Hey, Lance. Hey, Paul.
Hi, John.
Hey, I was sad today to hear about my favorite Giant, Homer Jones, passing. And I wanted to just share a little story. It was about 1966, and we had an athletic dinner at my high school, Cathedral Preparatory Seminary, and Chuck Mersine came and talked with us. He had been a Giant. He was
one of the baby Bulls.
Yeah, he had made a 30-yard catch and run, I think, in a Super Bowl with the Packers.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, and I think this shows the regard and care, enjoyment that players had with each other. He said training camp was coming up, and so he called Homer and said, you getting ready to come up? He goes, yeah, I'm getting ready to come up. He goes, well, I want to tell you, Homer, we have a transit strike in New York. And Homer said, oh, that's okay. I just take the subway anyway.
Old school as could be.
That's Homer. He was quite a character. Very fun-loving guy. Everybody who played with him, they always talked about how happy-go-lucky he was.
Yeah, and just one other thing. You mentioned he was extremely fast. But people may not realize he was 6'2", 220, so he didn't have much trouble.
Great point. And also, when he wanted to, he was a hell of a blocker. There were times in the Giants' goal line offense where he would actually line up off the tackle's shoulder as a tight end because he was that much of a blocker. But of course, you wouldn't use a guy like that to block because
the game has slightly changed since the 1960s.
But again, that was in goal line situations. That wasn't like in the middle of the field. You want him running downfield. Thank you. Thank you for the call. Good story.
Thanks for giving us your perspective on Homer Jones. Let's check in now with Len in Maryland. He joins us here on BBKO. What's happening, Len?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi, Len.
Good, Paulie. Thanks for the comments on Homer Jones.
Sure.
Not much to add, except he was a darn exciting football player, man. I think one of the best we had over the long term.
Pre-ESPN, and that's why I think a lot of times people lose him, in the smoke because he was pre-ESPN.
Yeah, one play stands out: Pittsburgh,
Earl Morrall,
old Pitt Stadium. Earl Morrall to Homer Jones for 99 yards. You can't get him much longer than that, Paul. Thanks for the comments. Hey, listen, a quick comment on your opening about talking about, the scouts working together and, the front office working together and so forth. The thing that always amazed me, and was especially so last year, how well our pro personnel scouts folks do in bringing players in. You get to midseason and you lose two tight ends, and all of a sudden they bring a guy in, and he's not that bad. I mean, they really do a terrific job. I think they do a better job on the pro personnel side than they do on the draft side, but that's just my opinion.
Well, I think that proved to be the case last year, specifically with the guys that wound up contributing after the season started.
Yeah, true.
Yeah,
true.
McLeod,
yeah, good
right?
point.
Hodgins,
yes.
Moreau.
Yeah, Hodgins, yeah.
And quite frankly, even Jarrad Davis may wind up being a starting linebacker this year.
Jarrad Davis, sure.
And they picked Jarrad Davis up right at the end of the year.
Yep. I know.
And in fairness, I think the coaching staff deserves credit. The guys that came from the outside, for example, Wink had familiarity with a lot of Ravens guys, members of the Bills staff. That helped too.
Yes.
It was a combined effort.
Yep.
Yeah. But I think they've got a pretty good depth chart on every position.
Looks good.
You get to the middle of October and the middle of November, and they still know the 5 best tight ends that are out there. And, then have to do an evaluation on who they should bring in. But I always admire what they do in bringing guys in who can play a little bit. Question, as we end training camp, and I don't want to keep Lance away from the barbecue.
It's okay. We got a few minutes to at least indulge you.
Right,
2 minutes. 2 minutes. I want this man to eat. Go ahead.
I will survive. I promise. Yes.
All right. One short question, and I'll ask it and take it off. Offline. We finish up this part of the training season. 90-man roster. You feel like these are the same 90 guys that are going to be there when we, get together at the end of July?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to make any
it.
changes in the next 6 weeks, Lance. Len, this is pretty much the 90 you got. But trust me, this is going to be a tough cut. This year, they're only making one cut. It goes from 90 to 53. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no multiple layers of cuts in this camp anymore. The NFL changed that rule.
Which means that before the rosters get finalized, you're going to see so much more movement because think about all the free agents that are going to be let go simultaneously. It's normally not like that.
It is going to be a free-for-all.
Yeah, so I could see, Len, to answer your question, could there be changes leading up to week 1?
Oh, yeah.
If a guy gets released? Sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's going to be a high volume of change prior to that.
Probably
given the
not.
fact that most teams are going to hold on to guys too.
Okay, let me address 2 positions, and then I'll take your answer off air, offline. Excuse me. Quarterback. Is DeVito the guy, or do you see us bringing in some competition before training camp?
Whoever the third guy is, he's a practice squad guy because I don't think the Giants will put 3 quarterbacks on the 53 anyway. So could DeVito possibly be the guy? He's got a chance to be because he's here.
Yeah.
But that doesn't guarantee anything.
Yeah, and they brought in Jacob Eason too, so it's possible DeVito now has some competition for if they want to hold somebody on the practice squad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Paulie, you've seen him, as much as anybody probably.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is he practice squad level? I mean, is he that good?
That's I at this point. I don't think he deserves consideration for the 53. I think practice squad level is about as far as he can go right now.
Okay. All right. Let me ask you the second question. More controversial, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Is there a starting level NFL left guard on this roster? I mean, I know there are bodies there. Is there a NFL starting level left guard on this roster?
They believe they all right, go ahead, Len. They believe they believe Azzuto is, and they believe Bredesen is right off the bat.
Ben Bredesen right off the bat. The quick answer.
Right off the bat, they think they have 2.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll talk later. See you at training camp, Paulie.
All right, Len, be well.
Right, Len, appreciate the call. Yeah, I mean, Ben Bredesen has already proven that he could play that position.
And Azzuto's already started some games, too.
Correct.
And I know
they're
very high on his ability.
On the resume. No, I'm with you. There's high, but I think Bredesen has a lot more starting experience.
No question.
To at least
they believe they have at least 2.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, that is going to wrap up Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. We will have a show tomorrow, but it is taped, so it will start airing immediately at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Just make sure that you take that into consideration.
And there will be a very special guest on that program. I invite you to check out our Twitter pages, Giants WFAN and Giants Twitter. We'll promote it tomorrow morning. Don't want to let you know too early, but a very special guest, and I promise you're going to want to listen to him.
And with that being said, today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live, part of the Giants platforms everywhere, and Giants.com/podcast. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest, and we'll speak to you on Friday right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Have a good one.